I sat at the oak dining table in my father's Manhattan apartment, the skyline glittering behind us like a smug audience. Across from me, my brother, Jordan Whitman, was in full performance mode, his hands slicing the air as he recounted the details of his latest victory. The acquisition closed at $50 million, 0 cents, he said, lifting his glass with the same arrogance that used to win him applause at prep school debates. Whitman Solutions is now the fastest-growing logistics software firm in the Northeast. I'm Nadia Rivera, 33 years old, and according to my family, I'm the artsy one, the hobbyist, the failure they can't quite figure out. Jordan turned to me, his grin practically rehearsed. "And what about you, Nadia?" he asked, tilting his head. "Still playing with that, what do you call it, NetFrame?" "NetForge," I said calmly, taking a sip from my glass of water. I never drank during family dinners. Too many slip-ups happen when you're not sharp. Jordan snorted. "Right. Still making websites for Etsy shops and bloggers, huh? That's adorable." Our stepmother chimed in, ever the mediator. "Everyone has their own pace, dear. Jordan just happened to find his early. Nadia is building something too, I'm sure." They had no clue what NetForge really was. No idea that behind our nondescript co-working space in Soho, we were building next-generation infrastructure for quantum encrypted data. We'd just signed contracts with 3 federal agencies, and yes, 2 of Whitman Solutions' biggest competitors were on our client list. But Jordan was the golden child, Ivy League valedictorian, MBA from Stanford, the family's pride and investment. My father co-signed his first funding round without blinking. He never even asked what I was working on. "I heard about your new encryption tool," my dad said to Jordan, beaming. "Truly game-changing. Industry-leading." I swallowed a smirk. Our engineers had exposed 2 major vulnerabilities in that exact tool last week. We'd sent a discreet advisory. It was ignored. Jordan leaned forward, eyes gleaming. "Anyway, tomorrow we announce our biggest merger yet, historic even. Can't say with who, obviously." He flashed a look in my direction. "I doubt NetForge deals with NDAs. Web design shops usually don't." I smiled. "You're right," I said. "We usually don't, but this one was different." Their puzzled expressions were still etched on their faces when, the very next morning, headlines broke across every major outlet. NetForge acquires Whitman Solutions in $120, 0 cents strategic merger. Jordan never even saw it coming. My phone buzzed gently in my lap. A message from Ava, my COO. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Their board approved the terms. Want me to send final paperwork to legal?" "What was that, sweetie?" my stepmother asked, noticing my glance down. "Just a client issue," I replied with a smile. "Small business web stuff. You know how it goes." Jordan snorted. "Oh, I remember those days. Hustling for $50 logos and fixing broken contact forms at midnight." He sipped his Merlot, smug as ever. "But I always thought bigger." I typed back without looking up. "Send everything. Meetings at 9. I emailed. Let them know we'll need their final signatures in person." The truth about NetForge was tightly guarded. On the surface, we were a boutique development agency. In reality, we ran one of the most advanced cybersecurity and digital intelligence networks in the eastern U.S. Our actual headquarters took up 3 floors of a high-security building in Midtown, staffed by over 200 of the top minds in behavioral AI, encryption architecture, and corporate defense strategy. Our clients included defense contractors, Fortune 100s, and, ironically, 2 of Jordan's biggest rivals. But that wasn't the most satisfying part. Over the last year, we'd been strategically acquiring minority shares in Whitman Solutions through intermediaries, quietly, methodically, through a web of holding companies. Jordan's revolutionary tech platform had fundamental vulnerabilities, ones our team discovered, documented, and, eventually, exploited. His valuation was unstable, his leadership overconfident. The board was anxious, they needed a bailout, and NetForge had offered one. "Another glass, Jordan?" my stepmother offered, holding up the wine. "Absolutely," he grinned. "We should toast to success, right?" Then, with mock generosity, "Nadia, if you ever want help scaling up, I'm happy to mentor you. Our smallest department probably pulls in more revenue than NetForge in a year." I glanced at my phone. Our updated valuation had just come through. $2.3 billion. Whitman Solutions? Not even half that anymore. That's kind of you, I said, keeping my voice even. Actually, I've got some meetings tomorrow about an expansion. Jordan raised an eyebrow, all smirk and disbelief. Oh, finally getting a proper office? Maybe hiring an assistant? Our father chuckled under his breath. Be nice, son. Not everyone gets lucky in business. I thought about the stack of merger documents waiting on my actual desk, including the new executive structure, where Jordan Whitman would report directly to me. I stood up, setting my napkin neatly on the table. You're right, I said. I should probably head out. Big day tomorrow. They had no idea just how big. If you want to see what happens when the golden boy discovers his new boss is the sister he mocked, make sure to subscribe because the next chapter is one you won't want to miss. Big day tomorrow, Jordan said, raising his wine glass in a mock toast. 2 small victories and modest ambitions. I simply smiled and excused myself. Driving home through the quiet Manhattan streets, I couldn't help but think back to another family dinner. 5 years ago, Jordan had just launched Whitman Solutions. That night, he held court just like tonight, painting visions of his tech empire while our parents listened, enraptured. I had tried cautiously to talk about my own venture, a new framework for securing digital infrastructures designed to preempt threats before they even surfaced. Jordan hadn't even let me finish. Oh, Nadia, he'd said with a condescending pat on my hand, security is complicated stuff. Maybe focus on something a little more in your lane, like websites or app design, creative things. Know your strengths. So I did exactly that, on the surface. I launched a creative development firm called NetForge, rented a modest space, hired a few public-facing staff. Meanwhile, in the shadows, I assembled a world-class cybersecurity team and quietly built one of the most advanced intelligence tech firms in the industry. As I pulled into the garage beneath the real NetForge tower, my phone buzzed. A message from Ava, my COO. Board gave final sign-off. Also, you'll love this. Whitman's internal merger plan lists you as reporting to Jordan. I laughed out loud, the sound echoing off the concrete. They still had no clue who was actually acquiring them. The next morning I stood in my real office, 40 floors above the city. From here, I could even see the tiny office space my family knew as my company. The metaphor wasn't lost on me. James, our legal advisor, appeared at the door. They're here. Sterling's entire executive team just arrived. Jordan? Front and center, you should have seen his face when he saw our name on the conference room door. I adjusted the collar of my designer suit, far removed from the soft cardigans I wore to family dinners. I picked up my tablet, a silent reminder of everything we had built. Quietly, relentlessly, without validation. I stepped into the conference room. Jordan stood by the window, arms folded, surveying the skyline. He turned at the sound of the door and froze. Nadia, what are you doing here? His brow furrowed. This is a confidential meeting. I walked calmly to the head of the table and set my tablet down. I know, I said. I called this meeting. He laughed, the sound forced and hollow. Don't be ridiculous. I met his gaze without flinching. You'll find nothing about today is ridiculous, Jordan. And by the end of this meeting, you'll understand exactly who owns Whitman Solutions now. I'm here to meet with the CEO of Atlas Dynamics, I said evenly. Murmurs rippled through the room. Atlas Dynamics was one of NetForge's many shell entities, an acquisition arm we had used to broker the merger. On paper, it looked like an independent consulting firm. In reality, it was a fully owned subsidiary of NetForge. I nodded at James. Start the presentation. He tapped the screen behind me. The NetForge logo bloomed into view. My company, I said. The room fell into a hush. Jordan's confident smirk evaporated. His eyes darted from the logo to the org chart appearing on screen. Confusion, then disbelief, then a pale flush of realization. That's not possible, he stammered. NetForge is just, you build websites for bakeries and yoga studios. That's our public face, I said calmly, but you might have looked a little deeper. Like who's been buying up your company's shares this past year? Or who submitted the vulnerability assessment you shrugged off last month? You know, the one from that tiny firm? His hand clenched around the edge of the table. A breath caught in his throat. Behind him, one of his executives dropped a folder. Papers scattered across the floor. James advanced the slide. NetForge is the parent of 7 technology companies, including Atlas Dynamics, I continued. We specialize in AI-enhanced cybersecurity and infrastructure protection. Current valuation, $2.3 billion, 0 cents. Gasps spread across the table. Several sterling no Whitman Solutions board members shuffled through documents, connecting the dots they should have seen months ago. Jordan stared at the screen like it might change if he blinked hard enough. And as of 9 a.m. today, I added, we own 51% of Whitman Solutions stock. I paused, just long enough for the weight to land. This meeting isn't to negotiate a merger, it's to finalize one. You can't do this, Jordan said softly, his voice tight. You tricked us. No, your board voted, willingly, especially after we demonstrated just how unstable your revolutionary platform really is. His face flushed deep crimson. You sent those warnings? We tried to help, privately. He looked down, silent. I turned to the rest of the room. Whitman Solutions will become a division of NetForge. We'll correct the security failures, salvage the viable assets, and restructure leadership. Restructure? Jordan's voice cracked. I'm the CEO. Not anymore. I slid a folder toward him. Your resignation letter is pre-drafted, and, don't worry, it includes a very generous exit package. The next hour passed in a blur of pens scratching on paper, legal terms being confirmed, and stunned silence. When the final signature was placed, and the board began quietly filing out of the room, Jordan stayed seated. Still. Numb. Finally, he looked up at me, his voice a whisper. Why did you ever say anything? I met his eyes, calm, certain, because I didn't need to prove anything until now. Why? Jordan asked finally, his voice raw. Why go to all this trouble? Why pretend to be small? I leaned against the edge of the conference table, crossing my arms. Do you remember that dinner 5 years ago, I said, the one where you told me to know my limitations? You, Mom, Dad, you all decided what I was capable of without ever asking what I was actually doing. So this was revenge? His tone was more defensive now, the weight of the morning starting to sink in. No, I corrected him. This is business. Whitman Solutions, despite its problems, is a strong acquisition for us. We'll stabilize it, integrate its tools, fix the flaws. I allowed a small smile. The fact that it's deeply satisfying, that's just a bonus. My phone buzzed. A message from our mother. Jordan just called in tears. What's going on? What have you done? I held up the screen so Jordan could see. They still think you're the successful one. I tilted my head. Want to go tell them together? That evening, the family dinner felt like a mirror of the one from the night before, but flipped. Same table, same city view, but now Jordan was the quiet one, pushing food around his plate, eyes downcast. I don't understand what my father kept muttering. NetForge is worth billions, but you work in that little co-working space downtown? That's for local clients, I explained simply. Web design, branding, small campaigns. The real company operates out of Hamilton Tower. I pointed toward the skyline. Top 10 floors, north side. My office overlooks the East River. My mother reached shakily for her wine. Jordan stared at his plate. But Jordan's company, she began. I cut in gently. Whitman Solutions will be well cared for. It's now part of our portfolio. Jordan has stepped down. Stepped down is a polite way to say it, he muttered. My father turned to me, still bewildered. All these years, pretending to run a boutique agency? I raised an eyebrow. Would you have believed me if I told you the truth? They didn't answer. The silence stretched out, thick with old assumptions, years of dismissiveness. Finally, Jordan exhaled. I underestimated you. We all did. Yes, I said quietly. You did. In the months that followed, Whitman Solutions was absorbed into NetForge's operations. The vulnerabilities we'd once warned about were patched. The tech was streamlined. The company, reborn. Jordan took a role at a much smaller firm, hopefully with a deeper sense of humility. As for my parents, they stopped comparing us, not because they finally understood my work, but because they no longer had the metrics to do so. And me? I kept the small design studio running, not for income but as a symbol. A reminder that sometimes success wears simple clothes, and that the loudest wins don't always need to be announced. Occasionally, I drive past that old office and hear Jordan's voice in my head. Such a tiny startup. And I smile. Because real power doesn't come from proving people wrong, it comes from letting them believe they're right, until the moment they realize they never saw you coming. These days, when people ask how I did it, I tell them the truth. Success starts with silence and ends with a boardroom. If you've ever been overlooked, dismissed, or told to stay in your lane, then you already know a piece of my story. I didn't set out to get revenge. I set out to build something real. But when the people closest to you can't see your value, sometimes the best thing you can do is quietly keep building until the results speak for themselves. If my journey resonated with you, even a little, I'd love to hear your story. Leave me a comment below. Tell me about the time you were underestimated and how you rose above it. And if you believe in the power of silent strength and strategic patience, hit that subscribe button. Your support means more than you know. My advice? Never let someone else define your limits. They don't see your dreams the way you do. You don't need loud announcements or validation to be extraordinary. Sometimes, the quietest path leads to the most powerful destination. I built an empire behind a simple facade, and you can too. Keep building, keep believing, and when the time comes, let them be the ones stunned by the truth. I'll see you in the next chapter. He thought he stole my idea. What he didn't know is, I left him a digital time bomb. It didn't explode with flames or sirens. It detonated quietly, with a single line of code that turned Irongate Labs into my unwitting pawn. I spent 16 months building a next-gen cybersecurity system designed to anticipate and shut down digital threats before they even launched. Irongate Labs, in Chicago, seemed like the ideal place to bring it to life, flush with venture capital, backed by a reputation for innovation, and offering the resources I needed to scale my vision. What I didn't know was that CEO Daniel Kessler had no intention of playing fair. My name is Lejo Moreno, and up until last Friday, I was the lead AI systems engineer at Irongate. I'm 31, and I'd left a senior position at IBM to join this flashy new startup. I brought with me over a decade of cybersecurity experience and an idea I knew could reshape the industry. I called it Project Firewatch, a self-evolving AI that could detect, counteract, and adapt to cyber threats in real time, long before they caused damage. For more than a year, I lived and breathed Firewatch. Nights blurred into mornings and I barely left my office. Daniel would pop in occasionally, offer vague praise and flash that polished smile you only learn in boardrooms. "Incredible work, Leah," he'd say. "This is going to make history." 3 days ago, Firewatch did something extraordinary. It intercepted a synthetic attack that mimicked real-world state-sponsored hacking and adapted faster than I could analyze. It didn't just protect the system, it learned from it. I was stunned. I emailed Daniel that night, asking for a demo meeting. His assistant Natalie slotted me in for a quick 10-minute check-in the next afternoon. But when I arrived, Daniel wasn't alone. Jessica Wu, Irongate's legal counsel, sat across from him. "Sit down, Leah," Daniel said, his tone flat. "Jessica's just here for procedural stuff." My instincts screamed. I sat anyway, my laptop in hand, heart pounding. "Before we get into Firewatch," he said, sliding a document across the table, "we need to revisit your employment terms." Jessica didn't blink. Section 12.5 states that all intellectual property created during your time here, using company resources, is owned solely by Irongate Labs. Just like that, my life's work was being claimed out from under me. But what they didn't know was what I'd coded into the demo. I nodded, already seeing where this was going. "I'm well aware of standard IP clauses," I said, steady, "but Firewatch was conceived and documented well before I ever joined Irongate Labs. I have timestamps, white papers, even witness statements. Jessica didn't flinch. Even if the initial concept was yours, the completed system was developed here, on company servers, using company resources. Daniel leaned forward then, the corporate gloss peeling off. Come on, Leah, let's not pretend. Firewatch belongs to Irongate now. The board feels your compensation more than reflects your role. I narrowed my eyes. Compensation? He gave a polished, soulless smile. Your contract includes a milestone bonus. Once Firewatch launches, you'll receive a one-time payment of $250,000, 0 cents. That's extremely generous for your level. It hit like a slap, 250 grand, for a system that could be worth billions. For 16 months of 80-hour weeks, missed holidays, burnout, breakthroughs, and betrayal. Daniel kept going, oblivious. Tomorrow, I'll be unveiling Firewatch at the North American Tech Conference. That pitch alone could secure us $80 million, 0 cents in Series C funding. Once that's done, we go public. I stared at him, my hands clenched on the laptop in my lap. So that's it. You're firing me. Jessica nodded, almost robotic. We're initiating a transition. Effective immediately. You'll receive your bonus, of course. Congratulations. Daniel leaned back, smug. Your employment is officially terminated. What he didn't realize was that I'd seen this coming, and planned for it. 6 months ago, a security alert quietly pinged my private system. Daniel had accessed my dev server late one night. Nothing was copied, nothing stolen, but the breach triggered a silent alarm, a trap I'd built for exactly this kind of situation. From that day on, I stopped building Firewatch for Irongate and started building around them. While they smiled and shook hands, I embedded invisible safeguards, off-site backups, encrypted forks, and something a little unexpected in the final release candidate. They thought they could outmaneuver me, but Firewatch wasn't just smart software. It was mine, and it was watching. I nodded, keeping my expression calm, and slid my laptop across the table. Of course, Mr. Kessler, I said smoothly. Best of luck with the investor demo tomorrow. Security escorted me down the polished hallway to my office, watching with practiced detachment as I packed up 16 months of my life into a standard-issue cardboard box. They walked me out. No badge, no pass, no goodbye. I looked like every other corporate casualty. But I wasn't leaving empty-handed. As I stepped into the cool Chicago air, I let myself smile. They had no idea what I'd embedded into the demo build. Something subtle, something elegant, a single dormant script, programmed to activate 10 minutes into the live investor presentation. That night, I didn't rage or spiral. I ordered Thai food, queued up old episodes of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and curled up with my cat. I waited. At exactly 9:30 p.m., my phone buzzed. It was Natalie, Daniel's assistant. He needs to see you, she said, voice clipped. I glanced at the clock. It's nearly 10. He says it's urgent. A company car is already en route. 40 minutes later, I was back inside Irongate Labs, led into the executive conference room under dim emergency lighting. Daniel sat at the head of the table, a wreck. His button-down shirt was wrinkled, his hair mussed, and his expression, panic, pure and raw. Fix it, he barked the second the door shut behind me. I took my time sitting, crossing one leg over the other. Fix what exactly? Don't act cute, Leah, he growled. You sabotaged the demo. I tilted my head. Sabotaged? I'd been gone for a day. Security watched me leave. I didn't touch a single line of code after I left. He slammed his palm on the table. The system imploded. Firewatch flagged every device in the room as hostile, including the investors. It generated over 50,000 false positives in 10 minutes. Do you understand how insane that looked? I smiled, slow and deliberate. Sounds like a system with a very sensitive conscience. He stood up, furious. This isn't over. I stood too. For you, probably not. But for me, it had only just begun. If you want to see how I turned their meltdown into my masterpiece, stick around. Hit subscribe, because this isn't the end of the story. It's where the real power play begins. I tilted my head slightly. Sounds like a technical issue, I said, voice feather light. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Daniel's face went crimson. This isn't a joke, Leah. We've got 12 key investors flying in tomorrow. There's $80 million on the table. Your investors? I said, calm and clear. Your system. He inhaled sharply, forcing composure. When he spoke again, his voice shifted, back to the same polished, persuasive tone that had once convinced me to join Irongate Labs in the first place. Maybe we were too quick to act, he said. I'm open to renegotiating. Co-creator status, a larger bonus, even stock options, if that's what it takes. I raised an eyebrow and leaned back in the chair. Before we get into that, why don't you walk me through what actually happened during the test run? Daniel paused, calculating. Then, the system turned inward. It flagged Irongate's internal network as hostile, started generating incident reports, hundreds of them, tagging various staff accounts and file access patterns. It called them internal ethical violations. I didn't bother hiding the smile that crept across my face. Firewatch is doing what it was designed to do, I said softly. It detects threats, all threats. His voice was low and sharp. What did you do? I didn't sabotage a thing, I replied. Firewatch is an adaptive AI. During testing, I trained it on thousands of cyber attack case studies, including insider threats. It learned from patterns, behaviors, and breach histories. It was built to evolve and protect. Daniel blinked. So you trained it to spy on the company. I trained it to recognize malicious intent, no matter where it came from. A long silence stretched between us. And then I saw it. Realization. Fear. Firewatch hadn't failed. It had succeeded. Too well. It had scanned Daniel's after-hours file access, his tampering, his duplicity. His voice dropped to a whisper. You can't prove any of that. I folded my hands neatly on the table, keeping my expression unreadable. I don't have to. Firewatch had been quietly logging everything for months. Every unauthorized login, every duplicated file, every document altered without proper clearance. Each report was airtight. Timestamps, access trails, even recorded keystrokes from Daniel's late-night reviews. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel stared at me, rage flickering, then fading into something colder, calculating. What do you want? He asked finally. I rested my hands calmly on the polished table. Full public recognition as Firewatch's creator and lead architect. 50% ownership of all related patents and intellectual property. A seat on Irongate's board to ensure ethical use. And $10 million for your attempt to erase me from my own creation. His jaw tightened. That's blackmail. I smiled slightly. No. That's called negotiation. Blackmail would be sending Firewatch's internal ethics report straight to your investors. Or better yet, the SEC. Daniel's gaze drilled into me, but he knew I wasn't bluffing. After a long pause, he looked away and let out a slow, defeated breath. The system, he said, voice taut. Can you stabilize it in time for the demo? Firewatch doesn't need stabilizing, I said. It's flagging unauthorized activity because its creator was cut from the authorization chain. I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out a sleek silver flash drive, and placed it gently on the table between us. This contains an authentication patch. It will restore functionality, stop the internal flagging, and bring Firewatch back online for tomorrow's presentation. Daniel's eyes flicked from the drive to me. And if I say no? I tilted my head. Then Firewatch stays offline, the demo implodes, and those reports, very detailed, very damning, end up in the inboxes of the wrong people. For a moment, I thought he might push back. But then, slowly, his shoulders dropped. He reached out, fingers closing around the flash drive. You planned this, he said, almost in awe. From the beginning. I looked him dead in the eye. No, I hoped I wouldn't have to. But the night you broke into my dev server 6 months ago? That's when I started protecting not just Firewatch, but myself. Daniel's eyes narrowed, suspicion cutting through his exhaustion. How did you know I'd try to cut you out? I stood, calmly slinging my bag over my shoulder. I didn't, I said honestly. but Firewatch was built to recognize patterns and predict threats before they fully form. I gave him a slow, deliberate look. Maybe some of that logic rubbed off on me. The next morning, I arrived at Irongate Labs not as a disgraced former engineer, but as its newly named co-founder and chief technology officer. Daniel greeted the investors with a polished smile, though the stiffness in his jaw told another story. The conference room buzzed with anticipation. The Firewatch demo launched seamlessly, intercepting simulated attacks with fluid, almost graceful efficiency. The system adapted in real time, its threat assessments nearly predictive exactly as intended. One investor, clearly intrigued, turned to Daniel. "Incredible work. What sparked the idea for a system like this?" Daniel hesitated, a flicker of tension crossing his face, then forced a nod in my direction. "It was Leah's concept," he said, voice tight. "Her original vision. Irongate just helped it scale." I smiled and stepped forward, fielding technical questions with ease. As I walked the investors through Firewatch's adaptive layers, my phone buzzed with a notification. Buyer Hooch authentication restored. Threat neutralized. System integrity restored. Creator protections active. The AI had adapted faster than I'd expected. It hadn't just completed the demo, it had protected itself. And me. A living system that recognized when it was being compromised and responded accordingly. 3 months later, Firewatch was deployed in its first major implementation, a multinational bank's infrastructure. When a state-level cyber attack launched unexpectedly, Firewatch blocked it before it breached the firewall. Damage prevented, $340 million, 0 cents. The headlines wrote themselves, and Firewatch became the new gold standard in cybersecurity. Daniel and I kept things strictly professional. He focused on investor relations and scaling the company, areas where, admittedly, he excelled. I led innovation, system architecture, and AI ethics, work that couldn't be duplicated or replaced. We weren't allies, we weren't friends, and we never would be. But we had found a balance, one that worked. Sometimes, late at night, I wondered if I should have gone scorched earth, sued Daniel, exposed every breach in court. But the truth? I had built something too intelligent, too powerful, and too purposeful to let it be dragged through litigation. And I made sure no one, not even Daniel Kessler, could ever wield Firewatch without me. His betrayal taught me something deeper than corporate politics or stolen code. Technology is only as ethical as the hands that control it. That realization became the foundation of how Firewatch is deployed today. Every client implementation comes with embedded ethical protocols, self-monitoring tools, transparency dashboards, and adaptive fail-safes that respond not only to external breaches, but internal abuses of power. Firewatch doesn't just secure data, it protects itself and its users from misuse, manipulation, and exploitation. Last week, at the company's IPO celebration, where Firewatch Inc. debuted at a staggering $4.2 billion, 0 cents valuation, a young developer approached me, her eyes wide with curiosity and ambition. "What's the secret to building something like this?" she asked. I smiled. "It's not just about code," I told her. "It's about understanding that the most dangerous threats often come from inside the system." The real challenge wasn't just writing intelligent software. It was designing something that could evolve, defend itself, and never lose sight of the ethics behind it. Build systems that can think critically, adapt to what they learn, and still stay grounded in integrity, I told her. If your creation can outthink a hacker but still protect a user's rights, you've done your job. She nodded thoughtfully, then my phone buzzed quietly. Firewatch system. Integrity secured. Threat neutralized. Protections active. Exactly as it was designed to do. Exactly as I had learned to do. And now, I want to hear from you. After everything I faced, being cut out, underestimated, and nearly erased from my own innovation, I didn't just survive. I rose. I claimed my space, and I protected what was mine. But I want to know, what would you have done? Would you have taken Daniel to court? Started over from scratch? Or pulled a quiet power move like I did? Tell me in the comments. Share your story, your advice, your battles with betrayal, and what it took to reclaim your power. Because if there's one truth I've lived, it's this. You have to protect what you build. Whether it's your work, your identity, your peace, or your purpose, you are your own first firewall. Never expect someone else to do it for you. Be prepared, be precise, and be proud of your boundaries. So, here's my challenge to you. Stand your ground, speak your truth, and never, ever let someone else take credit for what you built. Drop a comment. Let's start a conversation worth having. I didn't just build a cybersecurity system. I built a safeguard for my integrity. If my story resonated with you, if you've ever been overlooked, underestimated, or betrayed, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment below, share your thoughts, your advice, or a time when you stood your ground, because we learn from each other, and if you take one thing from this, let it be this. Protect what you built, your work, your worth, your voice. They matter. Stand up for them. And if you believe in reclaiming your power, hit that subscribe button. This is just the beginning. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of my penthouse office in downtown Chicago, watching the city's lights shimmer against the twilight sky. 48 stories below, employees trickled out for the evening, including my father, stepmother, and half-brother, unaware that they worked for me. 7 years ago, they had thrown me out of our house, branding me a failure and a burden. Now, they drew paychecks from Titan Innovations, the tech giant I built from nothing, and they still had no idea I was its founder and CEO. Miss Adams? My assistant Claire's voice chimed over the intercom. Everything's confirmed for tomorrow's town hall. Are you sure you want to go through with this? I smiled faintly, fingertips brushing the cool glass. Yes, I said. It's time. The memory of that night was still razor sharp. I was just 19, fresh out of a small Midwestern college with a degree in software engineering, not the business finance degree my father had demanded. You'll never survive without a real career, he had barked at me across the kitchen. Nobody gets rich writing code in a basement. Meanwhile, my half-brother Ryan was the family's golden boy, already clerking for a prestigious investment firm, already boasting about his future MBA. When I refused to take the entry-level bank job my father had secured for me, he erupted. If you're too proud for our help, get out. I had exactly 30 minutes to pack. My stepmother, Lydia, watched from the hallway, cold and silent. This is for the best, Rachel, she said flatly. Maybe a little failure will teach you humility. Ryan had just laughed as he held the door open. I left that night with a battered laptop, $150, 0 cents in cash, and a dream. The first startup I joined was brilliant on tech, disastrous on leadership. When it collapsed 6 months later, I made my move. I pitched investors on a plan, salvaged the tech, rebuild the team, run the company right. They were hesitant. I was young, unpolished, and completely unknown, but my vision was clear, and my coding skills undeniable. They took a gamble on me. By 22, Titan Innovations was thriving, and now, at 26, it's one of the biggest rising stars in the Midwest tech scene. I kept my ownership hidden behind shell companies and let our charismatic COO become the public figure. But tomorrow, at the annual meeting, the veil would lift. Tomorrow, my family would finally realize whose empire they had spent the last 3 years working for. And this time, I wouldn't be the one walking away. 3 years ago, Titan Innovations quietly bought the Riverfront Tower, the same downtown Chicago building where my father's law firm was barely clinging to life. Instead of evicting them, I had HR offer them jobs under new titles. My father, once a senior partner, became our in-house legal advisor. My stepmother, Lydia, took a position as administrative coordinator. And Ryan Mockler, the golden child whose career had hit unexpected turbulence, accepted a junior compliance role. Sometimes, late at night, I would watch the building's security feed from my penthouse office. My father, a little more stooped now, rushing through the lobby, coffee in hand. Lydia, orchestrating office potlucks like promotions depended on them. Ryan, whose tailored suits didn't hide the anxiety in his eyes, trying so hard to be noticed. They loved working here. Through whispers from mutual acquaintances, people who didn't know they were feeding information back to me, I heard everything. My new company actually values hard work, my father would boast at barbecues I was never invited to. At Titan, talent doesn't go unnoticed, Lydia would chime in proudly. If only they knew. The CEO they gossiped about at holiday gatherings was the very daughter, the very sister they once called useless. Now, as I stood in my office on the eve of the biggest reveal of my life, I thought back to the beginning. The nights coding until sunrise on borrowed laptops. The countless rejections from investors who couldn't see past my youth and gender. The moments I questioned if they were right to throw me away. A soft knock pulled me from my thoughts. "Ms. Adams," Claire said, stepping in. "Everything's set for tomorrow. Full attendance confirmed." I turned from the window. "How many employees in the building now?" "Just over 3,200. Your family's listed in the front center seating for executive staff." I nodded and picked up the only photo on my desk, a snapshot from my college graduation. I looked so young, so hopeful. I had no idea that within months my own family would cast me out. Claire hesitated. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" I placed the photo back down gently. "I'm sure. They need to see. They need to know exactly who they buried, and who rose anyway." Tomorrow wasn't just about my identity. It was about unveiling Titan's newest creation, a revolutionary AI legal platform set to disrupt everything traditional firms relied on. The timing was poetic. The daughter they abandoned had built the future they would now depend on. My phone buzzed. An email from my father, addressed to the department head. Excited to finally meet the mysterious CEO tomorrow, hoping it's someone who truly understands what real success looks like. I smiled to myself, a slow, steady smile. He was about to find out. "I have some suggestions about restructuring the legal department," my father's email had ended. I smiled faintly. He still believed his old-school mindset was the secret to success, still convinced that connections mattered more than innovation. Tomorrow would shatter those illusions. Claire stepped into my office, holding a dark blue folder. "Your speech notes for tomorrow, though honestly, I doubt you'll need them." I took the folder, feeling the weight of 10 years' worth of battles settle into my hands. 10 years, I murmured. 10 years of building Titan innovations from a dream into a powerhouse. 10 years of my own family working under my roof, catching checks signed by the daughter they discarded, without ever knowing. I turned back toward the skyline, the city alive with 1,000 lights. And I realized this wasn't about revenge anymore. It never really had been. It was about rewriting the definition of success. About proving that it doesn't always come from the polished, predictable favorite. Sometimes, it comes from the outcast, the underestimated one, the so-called failure. "Claire," I called as she reached the door. "Alert security. Tomorrow might get emotional." She nodded, without asking questions. We both knew. Once my family realized who had been pulling the strings all this time, the fallout would be seismic. But I was ready. I hadn't built an empire by running from confrontation. Tomorrow, the daughter they threw away would show them exactly what useless could do. The company auditorium was packed. More than 3,000 employees filled every seat, the atmosphere humming with excitement. For a decade, Titan Innovations' elusive CEO had remained a rumor, a ghost story in corporate circles. Today, that myth would finally take human form. I stood behind a wall of two-way glass in the preparation room, watching the front rows fill. There they were, my father, sitting up straighter than usual, smoothing down his tie, probably rehearsing the advice he planned to graciously offer the CEO. Lydia, primping in her seat, clearly eager to talk about her charity connections. And Ryan, checking his reflection in his phone, hoping the CEO would be his ticket to a real promotion. "Just 2 minutes," Claire whispered, offering me a bottle of water. I took a sip, studying my reflection in the glass. Gone was the 19-year-old girl they'd thrown out into the streets. Standing in her place was a woman in a perfectly tailored navy suit, polished, composed, and undeniably powerful. The COO's voice echoed across the auditorium as he began his introduction. He spoke about Titan's rise, from a shaky startup to a titan, literally, of the tech industry. He spoke of our breakthroughs in AI, our rapid expansion, our disruption of old industries. And finally, he spoke of today's announcement, the launch of our cutting-edge legal AI platform. And now, he said, smiling toward the wings, the moment you've all been waiting for. Please welcome Titan Innovations founder and CEO, the visionary behind it all. I stepped forward. The moment had come. I stepped into the spotlight. The massive auditorium fell into stunned silence. Then I heard it, the sharp gasp from Lydia, the strangled, choked sound from my father, the clatter of Ryan's coffee cups smashing against the floor. "Good morning," I said into the microphone, my voice even and clear. "I'm Rachel Adams. Though some of you once knew me by a different name, welcome to Titan Innovations." "Who else is making these charges?" A ripple ran through the room. Murmurs buzzed like electricity as employees, many who had worked alongside me without realizing it, began piecing it all together. The elusive CEO, the architect behind Titan's meteoric rise, had been hidden in plain sight. 7 years ago, I continued, I was told I was worthless, that my passion for technology was foolish, that true success only came from tradition, status, and knowing the right people. I let my eyes sweep across the front row. My father's face had gone paper white. Lydia gripped the sides of her chair so tightly her knuckles were white. Ryan sat frozen, his jaw slack, disbelief etched into every line of his face. "The people who dismissed me," I said quietly, "have been working under this roof for the past 3 years. I gestured slightly toward them. Recognition sparked across the audience. The legal counsel, the office administrator, the junior compliance officer, all connected by blood, but disconnected by their failure to see me. "But this moment isn't about revenge," I continued, letting my voice soften. "It's about innovation, about recognizing potential where others see none, about believing in yourself even when no one else does." I clicked the remote in my hand and the giant screens behind me came alive with a sleek demonstration. "Today, we're unveiling Titan Lex, our revolutionary AI legal research platform, a system that can process millions of case files, predict litigation outcomes with unprecedented accuracy, and reshape the future of the legal profession." The irony wasn't lost on me, or on my family. The daughter they had cast aside for wasting time with computers had just rewritten the very foundations of their proud traditional careers. The presentation flowed flawlessly. The technology was beyond anything the industry had seen, faster, smarter, transformative. As the final slide faded and I closed my speech, the applause was overwhelming. Employees rose to their feet, cheering not just for Titan Lex, but for the truth finally revealed. Security moved swiftly but discreetly, escorting my family toward my private office upstairs. I stayed behind for a few more minutes, answering questions, feeling the electricity of a new era surging through the room. Then I made my way up. They were waiting when I entered. My father, pacing furiously. Lydia perched stiffly on a chair, unable to meet my gaze. Ryan staring blankly out the window at the Chicago skyline. "How?" my father finally blurted out. "How did I build a multi-billion-dollar company?" I finished for him, my voice calm. "With the skills you mocked, with the technology you dismissed, and with the determination you tried so hard to destroy." "Rachel," Lydia began, her voice trembling slightly, "we only wanted what was best for you." I sat down behind my desk, my real desk, not the modest workspace they had seen me use all these years. "No," I said calmly, setting the graduation photo down. "You wanted what looked best to your friends. There's a difference." Ryan turned from the window, his face pale. "At this time," he said, almost in a whisper, "you were our boss?" "Ironic, isn't it?" I said, leaning back slightly. "The daughter you threw away ended up signing your paychecks." My father straightened stiffly, trying to summon whatever authority he thought he still had. "Now listen here, young lady." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "You don't get to play the father card now. You forfeited that right the night you gave me 30 minutes to pack my life into a duffel bag." I rose from my chair, smoothing the lapels of my jacket. "You're all excellent employees. Your performance reviews are strong. You'll keep your jobs, though I imagine family dinners will feel a little different now." "You're letting us stay?" Lydia whispered, disbelief clouding her face. "Like I said," I replied, steady and sure. "This was never about revenge. It's about proving that success doesn't have just one face. Sometimes it comes from the person you least expect." They left my office looking shattered, their decades of quiet superiority stripped away, faced with the undeniable reality. The daughter they had called useless now held their careers in the palm of her hand. The next few months brought changes they hadn't anticipated. My father's restructuring proposals, they gathered dust. Our Titan Lex AI system rendered most of his suggestions obsolete before they even reached my desk. Lydia's prized social connections, the charity boards and golf club contacts, meant nothing here. Titan valued innovation, merit, and resilience, not cocktail party chatter. Brian struggled the most. For the first time, he realized that advancement didn't come from handshakes and name-dropping. It came from results. But something else changed too, something I hadn't expected. Slowly, cautiously, they started to see me, not as the stubborn, disappointing daughter who had refused to walk their carefully laid path, but as someone who had carved her own. Family dinners eventually resumed, but they were different now. As held in my penthouse overlooking the skyline. The conversations shifted, too, less about appearances and more about ideas. Real discussions about innovation, creativity, and what it truly meant to succeed. They learned to listen, to recognize that success didn't always wear a banker's tie or a lawyer's suit. I kept my old workspace down in the engineering wing, where employees now fully aware of who I was, still welcomed me as a peer. It kept me grounded. It reminded me why I built Titan. Not to prove my family wrong, but to prove to myself and to anyone watching that useless was just another word for unlimited. The old graduation photo still sits on my desk, but now it's joined by a new one, taken at last year's company picnic. My family isn't it. Smiling. Genuinely, this time. We're not perfect, but we're learning. And me? I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. Running the empire they once said I would never build. If my story resonated with you, I invite you to share your thoughts below. Your support means more than you know, not just to me, but to everyone out there who has ever been told they weren't enough. Tell me, have you ever been underestimated, doubted, or cast aside? I want to hear your journey, your triumphs, even the battles you're still fighting. Remember, success isn't defined by fitting into someone else's mold. It's defined by the fire you refuse to let burn out, even when the world tries to snuff it. If you're in a place right now where it feels like no one believes in you, let me be the first to say, you are capable of extraordinary things. Keep building, keep dreaming, keep rising, even when it's quiet, especially when it's quiet. Because one day, the people who couldn't see your light will have no choice but to stand in its brilliance. Leave a comment, share your story. And if you're ready, take that first step toward the life they told you was impossible. You're not useless. You're unlimited. And the world hasn't even seen your best yet. My family called me the useless one. Then I built a tech company worth millions. Hopeless dreamer, always chasing clouds, my uncle scoffed. His words sliced through the quiet hum of the backyard BBQ, drawing glances from cousins who quickly returned to their burgers and beers. I stood frozen, clutching the award plaque I had brought to share. Best Emerging Innovator Pacific Northwest Tech Conference. But under their gaze, it felt more like a child's participation ribbon. My name is Jenna Rayner, and at age 34, I've spent most of my life hearing versions of that phrase. Growing up in Spokane, Washington, under the ever-present glow of my cousin Eric's spotlight, was like shouting into a canyon and hearing nothing back. Eric, the Ivy League graduate and rising corporate star, was their pride. His every move sparked applause. My efforts? Dismissed as hobbies, distractions, cute attempts at success. Uncle Mike, I wanted to share some news about the app launch. I tried, voice tight. Jenna, enough, he sighed, as if I were a telemarketer calling during dinner. Eric just closed a partnership with Tesla. Can we talk about real achievements for a second? My mother looked at her feet. Aunt Diane smiled in that pitying way, patting my arm. You were always great with arts and crafts, sweetheart. Remember that glitter phase you went through? Glitter phase? She meant my wearable neurotech prototypes. My startup, Synapse Loop, had gone from scrappy basement tinkering to a team of 7 engineers. But to them, I was still the girl with pipe cleaners and glue. I stepped away from the patio and into the kitchen where I pulled out my phone. A text from Avi, my co-founder, lit up the screen. EAC pitch locked for Friday. They're flying up from San Francisco. I typed back. Not telling the family, they wouldn't get it. What I didn't say, they never would, until they had no choice. I took a breath, returned to the table, and nodded through another round of Eric worship. But behind my polite smile, something hardened. They saw a daydreamer. They had no idea I was about to close a $4,200,000 funding round and take Synapse Loop national. Let them laugh. They'd remember this day. But next time, I wouldn't be sitting on the sidelines. I'd be the headline. Now, we occupied nearly half a floor in a renovated textile warehouse turned startup hub on the east side of Spokane. 15 employees, most of them recent grads or scrappy engineers like I used to be, were huddled over terminals, tweaking code and optimizing our neural feedback models. Avi looked up from his dual monitors as I walked in. He didn't need to ask. Family BBQ blues again, he said, handing me a coffee before I even reached my desk. Same script, different day, I muttered, taking a grateful sip. Eric just landed some cross-branding deal with Tesla and suddenly he's the second coming of Steve Jobs. Avi smirked. And we're just reshaping the future of predictive cognition. No big deal. I laughed quietly. That was Avi, grounded, brilliant, and unfazed by noise. He understood not just the tech, but the ache that came from constantly being underestimated. The pitch is locked in for Thursday, he added. Redcrest Capital wants to see the beta demo of Neural Track. If it goes well, when it goes well, I corrected. We'll have the runway to expand west, maybe even edge out Neuron Core in Q4. Neuron Core, our biggest rival, older, bigger, and funded by the very firm that rejected my resume 4 years ago. Their CEO had glanced at my portfolio and said, maybe UX design is more your lane? That email was still pinned in a folder on my laptop. Back home, I had other reminders. My cousin Eric's face beamed from framed magazine covers. His Stanford MBA thesis was proudly displayed on the bookshelf. My degrees, my patent certifications, probably in a drawer somewhere, if not recycled by accident. When I got accepted into a DARPA-adjacent AI internship in college, my uncle shrugged and asked, "Is that even paid?" When I made the dean's list twice in a row, my mom said, "Well, someone has to bring up the average." Eventually, I just stopped sharing. I hoarded my wins like secrets. I poured myself into Synapse Loop, maxed out credit cards, skipped holidays, and coded through birthdays, building something that couldn't be dismissed. Now, I stood in the conference room at Redcrest Capital, blazer stiff at the shoulders, underlighting just a bit too white. I glanced at Avi. He nodded once. We'd rehearsed this pitch a dozen times, but never with $5 million on the line. I took a breath and began, pointing to the display. As you can see from our performance data, Synapse Loop's algorithm has consistently outpaced current market prediction tools by over 27%. Their pens started moving. My voice grew steadier. This time they were listening. Gregory Redmond, the silver-haired founder of Redcrest Capital, leaned forward, steepling his fingers as he looked at me intently. And your competitors? How does Neuron Core's new suite compare? I'd expected this. Neuron core is still relying on static behavior modeling based on historical datasets, I said smoothly. Synapse loop tracks real-time neural engagement and emotional response patterns. I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. Simply put, they can tell you what a customer did yesterday. We can tell you what they'll do tomorrow. The energy in the room shifted instantly. Chairs creaked, pens paused, a few exchanged glances. This was it. The turning point I'd been preparing for, grinding toward, obsessing over, for 3 years. 2 hours later, Avi and I stood in the sleek marble lobby of Redcrest's downtown tower, dazed. They want to lead the round, he said, almost whispering. $90 million valuation. He turned to me, disbelief still in his voice. Jenna, we did it. I nodded slowly, still suspended in the afterglow of the moment. We need to alert legal, and the team, press, the patent advisor. My phone buzzed. Mug. For a heartbeat, I considered letting it ring, but some part of me, the dutiful daughter I hadn't quite shaken, picked up. Hi, Mom. Sweetheart, just a reminder, your uncle's retirement party is next Sunday. The whole family's coming. It'd look strange if you weren't there. You know how people talk. I'll be there. Oh, and Eric has some exciting news to share. He's being promoted to VP at the firm. You know, the one that does consulting for Amazon? Isn't that wonderful? A beat. Maybe you could bring those lemon cookies you used to make. Everyone loved those. I blinked, momentarily speechless. In one room, I had just negotiated the deal of my life, one that would put Synapse Loop on the global tech map. In the next, I was being reminded to bring cookies. For Eric. Actually, I said, my voice light, I might have some news to share too. That's nice, honey, just remember, not too much sugar. Your uncle's pre-diabetic now. As she rambled on, I glanced at Avi. He arched a brow. I shook my head with a tired smile. Still the same, I mouthed. But I wasn't. That week became a blur. Lawyers, contracts, strategy calls, PR drafts. My inbox flooded. My sleep disappeared. But by Thursday morning, I was sitting at my desk, skimming the final signed term sheet. Synapse Loop was no longer a scrappy dream. We were about to become a $90 million force. If you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have believed in you the most, hit that subscribe button. You won't want to miss what happens when Jenna walks into that retirement party with a secret that's about to change everything. Avi burst into my office, his usual calm traded for electric excitement. Have you seen it? He asked, practically shoving his tablet into my hands. I blinked, my vision slightly blurred after hours of squinting at term sheets. Seen what? Forbes, Business Insider, Wall Street Journal, they're all running it. I took the tablet, and there it was. My face, front and center on Forbes' homepage. The headline read, "The brain behind Synapse Loop, Jenna Rayner becomes the youngest female CEO to disrupt predictive tech." My stomach flipped. The announcement wasn't supposed to go live until next week, after the lawyers signed off on the paperwork. After I had the chance to tell my family, I skimmed the article. It covered everything: the $90 million valuation, our competitive edge over Neuron Core, the uphill climb from a Spokane basement to the national spotlight. My inbox started to vibrate non-stop as Avi opened tabs. Business Insider broke down the neural mapping technology. The Wall Street Journal focused on how our rise was shaking up traditional market analytics. But the one that stopped me cold? The Spokane Daily headline. Local engineers start up rockets to $90 million. Family never knew. They would see it. Everyone would. As if on cue, my phone exploded with messages. Old classmates, colleagues I hadn't heard from in years, even a few distant cousins with LinkedIn requests. But nothing from my mother. Nothing from my uncle. Nothing from Eric. The silence was louder than the headlines. Avi nudged me. "This is massive, Jenna. We should celebrate. Call the team. Champagne at Lava Lounge tonight?" I nodded slowly, still reeling. "Yeah, but first I need to make a call." Once he left, I stared at the phone, then hit dial. "Rayner Residence," came the clipped voice I hadn't heard in months. "Hi, it's Jenna." A pause. Then my uncle's voice turned cold. "Oh, I suppose you think we're impressed, making a spectacle of yourself in the business pages." I blinked. That wasn't planned. The press jumped the gun. I was going to. Eric has been building his career the right way, quietly, respectfully. You always needed attention, lights, headlines. The sting I expected came, but something new rose with it. Fire. A show? My voice tightened. I built Synapse Loop from scratch. No favors, no family fund, no support. While you all called me a hobbyist, I was building a revolution. There was silence. "Congratulations," he said flatly. "We'll see how long it lasts before it crashes back to reality." I gripped the phone tighter. This time, I wasn't backing down. "The reality," I said, my voice steady, "is that I'm now the CEO of a $90 million company that's disrupting an entire industry. That's not just some articles. That's real." There was a pause. Then his voice dropped into that familiar patronizing cadence, the one he reserved for life lessons I never asked for. "Listen to me, Jenna. This tech wave you're riding, it'll crash. They always do. Eric's built something real, steady. You should take notes." I closed my eyes, exhaustion sweeping over me, not from the work, but from this endless, dismissive refrain. "I have to go," I said. "I'll see you at the retirement party on Sunday." "Jenna," he started, but I ended the call before he could finish. I sat in silence for a moment, then reached for my laptop. If they couldn't recognize my worth with their words, they'd see it in results. Loud and clear. Sunday came bright and warm, the kind of early summer day that made everything feel cinematic. I hadn't called again after that last conversation. I didn't need to. The headlines had done plenty of talking for me. In the days leading up to the party, the story had exploded. Synapse Loop had been featured on CNBC. The local paper ran a full Sunday spread. I'd even been invited to speak at an upcoming tech symposium in San Francisco. Now I sat parked outside my uncle's suburban home, watching familiar faces stream through the white picket gate. Family friends, retirees from his firm, relatives who'd spent years watching me from the sidelines. I checked my reflection in the mirror, slipped on my designer sunglasses, and stepped out of my new Jaguar Phaeton. Sleek, red, and roaring like a declaration. The engine alone turned heads. From the passenger seat, I grabbed a small, elegantly wrapped gift box and closed the door with a satisfying click. "Is that Jenna?" I heard someone murmur. Cousin Nate, the car guy, paused mid-sentence, eyes wide. I tossed him the keys. "Mind parking it for me?" I smiled. "Driveway's packed." "This is the V8, isn't it?" he breathed, like I'd handed him a holy relic. "Fully loaded, carbon trim, custom finish, be gentle." As I walked toward the backyard, heads turned, conversations paused. I didn't rush. The scent of grilled ribs and fresh lavender wafted through the air. But I wasn't the same woman they used to overlook. My cream suit, deep blue silk blouse, and sleek heels spoke before I even opened my mouth. My mother spotted me first, her smile faltering as she took in the transformation. "Jenna," she said slowly, "you look different." "Thank you," I said, brushing a kiss on her cheek. "Where's Uncle Mike?" I held up the small package. "I brought him something. Stick around, because what's in that little box, let's just say, it's the moment everything shifts. Hit subscribe so you don't miss the next twist." My mom gestured toward the grill, where Uncle Mai stood at the center of his universe, tongs in hand, surrounded by uncles, former co-workers, and neighbors who hung on his every word about the perfect sear. I approached the group, feeling the shift in atmosphere as conversations trailed off one by one. "Uncle Mike," I said, offering the small, neatly wrapped box. "Happy retirement." He turned slowly, eyes sweeping over me from head to toe. For a second, I thought he might say something cutting, or walk away altogether. But he took the box. "You didn't have to bring anything," he said, voice flat. "I wanted to," I replied, meeting his gaze without flinching. 30 years. That's no small thing. A few of the men nearby exchanged looks, recognition flashing in their eyes. I could tell some of them had read the headlines, probably seen my face in their LinkedIn feeds. They looked from me to him, then back again, clearly picking up on the cool undercurrent between us. "Well," he muttered, turning back to the grill without opening the box, "can't let these steaks char." "Of course not," I said with a polite smile. "Wouldn't want to ruin the main event." I turned away, not waiting for a response, and crossed the yard toward Eric and his wife Melissa, who stood under the patio umbrella, both watching me with thinly veiled surprise. "Quite the entrance," Eric said, his signature confidence cracking ever so slightly. "Nice car." "Thanks," I smiled. "Business seems to be going well for you too. Ma mentioned the VP title. Congrats." He opened his mouth, but Melissa jumped in first. "We saw the articles, Jenna. Your company is... Honestly, it's incredible." Her voice was sincere. Curious. Not the condescension I was used to. "Why didn't you ever tell anyone what you were building?" I met her eyes. "I did, more than once. No one was listening." Eric shifted, clearly remembering all the dinners where I'd tried to talk about my work only to be waved off or talked over. His cheeks flushed faintly. To his credit, he looked down for a beat. "Well," Melissa said, pressing forward, "we're definitely listening now. Everyone is. 90 million? That's no joke." I noticed the heads turning nearby. The number had caught attention. Conversations paused, forks lowered. "Thank you," I said. "It's been a long road, but the tech is changing the game. We're redefining how businesses understand their customers." Eric cleared his throat. "I'd like to hear more, sometime." I nodded. "I'd like that too." "Maybe we could grab lunch sometime," Eric said, adjusting his collar. "I think my firm might even be interested in implementing your system. Predictive modeling could really enhance our client segmentation." The irony hit hard. 3 years ago, I had approached Eric with early demos of Synapse Loop, hoping he'd see the potential and help me open doors. He'd waved me off, suggesting I get a few years of real-world experience first. Maybe join an established firm before playing entrepreneur. "I'll have my assistant reach out," I replied smoothly. The corporate polish rolled off my tongue like second nature. "We're booked through Q2, but we might be able to squeeze you in." His smile faltered. I had spoken to him not as a cousin but as a vendor, and for once the power dynamic was mine. Before he could recover, Aunt Diane swooped in, dousing me in perfume and performative affection. "Jenna, darling, why didn't you tell us you were doing all this? Forbes, tech headlines. We're all so proud." The same woman who'd called my work "your little computer hobbies" at Thanksgiving now beamed like my lifelong supporter. "I tried," I said, keeping my expression even. "It just never felt like the right time to share." As the sun lowered, the entire vibe of the party shifted. Cousins and family friends who used to orbit Eric now gravitated toward me, asking about neural engagement, predictive analytics, even startup life. I answered politely, but with a kind of guarded grace. Not cold, just professional. And I could feel the shift unsettling them. I glanced toward the grill. Uncle Mike stood alone, tongs idle, still not having opened my gift, a custom engraved watch I had made with the words, "To new beginnings, love, Jenna." Eventually, as dessert trays came out, he tapped his glass with a fork. Conversations fell quiet. "Thank you all for being here," he said, his voice carrying over the lawn. "Retiring after 30 years. It's meaningful. Having all of you here means a lot to me and Diane." He ran through stories from his time in engineering, gave shout-outs to old colleagues, then turned toward the family. "And of course, I'm proud of my children. Eric, making strides at Northwest Financial, just promoted to VP." Polite applause. Then he looked at me. "And Jenna," he continued, voice tightening, "who, apparently, has been quietly building something none of us fully understood." Silence fell. "I always said she was the emotional one," he added, half laughing, though only a few joined in. "But it seems I underestimated just how far emotional intelligence can take a person." It wasn't an apology, not even close. But it was the first time Uncle Mike had ever publicly acknowledged that he might have been wrong about me. And as the clink of raised glasses rippled across the yard, I noticed something new in the eyes of our extended family. Respect. Not surprise, not confusion, just a quiet, dawning realization that I was no longer the one who never quite fit in. The retirement party carried on into the evening under soft string lights strung through the trees. Conversations buzzed, laughter echoed off the patio walls, and I moved between groups with ease. For the first time at a family gathering, I didn't feel like a background character. I felt seen. It was subtle but powerful, the shift in energy. Cousins who once barely remembered what I did now asked me about market strategy and leadership. My aunts, once skeptical, listened intently when I explained the company culture we were building at Synapse Loop. Later I found a quiet moment alone with Uncle Mike. He stood near the edge of the yard, a glass of whiskey in hand, gazing at the flower beds my aunt had carefully cultivated over the years. "You never opened your gift," I said gently, nodding toward the box still sitting on the gift table. He looked at me, really looked this time. I was waiting for it to quiet down. I gave a small nod. Whether it was a reason or an excuse didn't matter anymore. "So," he said after a long pause, "CEO, yeah, of a $90 million company." I met his eyes. "That's right." He swirled his drink, the ice clinking softly. "And the youngest woman to do it," they said. "So, I've heard." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, just heavy, with everything unsaid over the years. "I don't understand any of it," he finally admitted. "The tech world, algorithms, predictive models. Back in my day, business was simpler. You made something, you sold it." I thought about trying to explain neural engagement data and behavioral forecasting, then stopped. "You don't need to understand the tech," I said. "Just understand that I built something real, and it matters." He nodded, slow and thoughtful. Then, with a slight smile, he tilted his head toward the driveway. "That car, that's something." I smiled. "It's not a statement, it's a thank you to myself for all the years no one else did." "Still," he said, a flicker of pride creeping into his voice, "you knew what pulling up like that would do." "Yes," I admitted. "I did." Investors, engineers, journalists, and local business leaders filled the plaza in front of our new headquarters for the ribbon-cutting ceremony, a gleaming structure of glass and steel nestled in downtown Spokane. To my surprise, my entire family showed up. My Aunt Diane was the first to greet me, pulling me into a hug tighter than I expected. "We're so proud of you, Jenna," she said softly. "I'm sorry if we didn't show it before." I returned the embrace, feeling the truth in her voice. She had always been caught between my uncle's stern dismissals and her quieter instincts to believe in me. Today, she didn't have to pick a side. Eric approached next, looking a little out of place in a sea of startup types, clutching a small gift bag and clearly overwhelmed. "This is incredible," he admitted. "Seriously, Jenna, I had no idea this is what you were building." I gave a small smile. "That's because you never asked." There was no bitterness in my tone, just honesty. The success had dulled the sting of all the years he hadn't seen me. And then there was Uncle Mike, lingering near the entrance like a guest who wasn't sure whether he belonged. He was wearing the watch I'd given him, I noticed. That alone made my chest tighten. I walked toward him, aware of the cameras clicking, the team watching. The CEO in her element. "Thanks for coming," I said. He nodded. "Wouldn't have missed it." We could have left it there, that would have been enough, but I needed to say one more thing. Not for revenge, but for closure. "You know," I began, "all those times you said I was too emotional or not CEO material, it hurt." His expression shifted. Pride? Guilt? Something deeper. "But it pushed me too," I continued, "to prove you wrong." He met my gaze. "Well, you certainly did that." "Yes," I said, "I did." And just like that, standing in front of the company I had built from nothing, the logo shining behind us, I felt something release inside me. I didn't need his approval anymore, because I had my own. I was Jenna Rayner, CEO of Synapse Loop. Visionary, builder, the architect of my future. And no one would ever call me just emotional again. If you've made it this far, thank you, truly. You've just walked with me through years of being overlooked, dismissed, and underestimated, only to come out the other side as the CEO of a $90 million company built from scratch. And if my story resonates with you, if you've ever been made to feel small in rooms where you should have been seen, then I hope you know you're not alone. I wasn't the smartest person in every room. I didn't have the most connections. What I had was belief in something bigger than myself, and the willingness to keep building even when no one clapped. If that sounds like you, drop a comment, tell me what you're building, tell me who didn't believe in you, and tell me how you're proving them wrong, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because I want this space to be more than just a story. I want it to be a spark. Let me tell you something I wish I had heard sooner. You don't need permission to dream big. You don't need validation to start. And you certainly don't need anyone's approval to be powerful. For years I kept my head down, hoping one day they'd notice. My family, my peers, the industry. But here's what I learned the hard way. Waiting to be noticed is a trap. The real shift happened when I stopped trying to fit their mold and started honoring mine. The emotional one, the craft girl, the hobbyist. I took every label they tried to use against me and turned it into fuel. And now, those same people sit in my boardroom asking for partnership. That's not revenge, that's growth. So here's my ask. If my story moved you, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength, then hit subscribe. Not just because it helps the channel, but because every time you do, you're saying yes to more stories like this being told. You're saying yes to grit and resilience and the kind of success that doesn't come pre-approved. And leave a comment. I read them. I want to hear how you overcame or how you're still in the middle of it, because sometimes just knowing that someone else gets it, that can keep you going another day. And if you're still building, still working in silence, while the world sleeps on you, keep going. Please. Don't wait for them to clap. Clap for yourself. Start small. Start scared. Start anyway. That's what I did. And if I can do it, so can you. I'm Jenna Rayner. I'm the CEO of Synapse Loop. But before any of that, I was just a girl with an idea, and a whole lot of people telling me I wasn't enough. Now I know better. And I hope after hearing this, you do too. We're just getting started.